All right, you guys, we've got a very special treat for everybody today, especially for me, I think, because I'm such a Sega Genesis-aholic. And I don't know if I've ever really kind of said this before, but, Electric Playground, I think, was born out of my newfound obsession with the Sega Genesis. I got back into games because I went to school and, started dating people and thought about other things. And then I got the NES and I thought, this is really cute. And then I got the Sega Genesis and it was like, and I think it was that love of games and that obsession with games that was rekindled in me from the Sega Genesis that sort of set me on my way to create Electric Playground. So you can thank Sega and the Genesis console for us doing the show today, which is really cool because we have one of the major creators that was working with Sega, Ed Annunziata, who created Ecco the Dolphin, and that's kind of why we brought him into this conversation. But he worked on lots and lots of Sega titles and other titles as well for the PlayStation and other consoles. He's got a new Switch game we'll talk about. But I wanted to talk with Ed for a long time, and this just worked out to be a perfect fit because we had the two gentlemen that created or helped to create Jupiter and Mars, which we just talked about a little bit on EP Live. It's a PlayStation exclusive for now, but might be coming to other machines. Maybe we'll find out about that today, that you can play in VR or non-VR. We've got Sam Kennedy and James Mielke with us. And my first question is going to go to you guys from Tigertron, which is their company. The game is out, and how does it feel to have players out there checking out your work? And it's frozen.
It's a big relief. I mean, the feedback from the people who've been playing the game has actually been really good. Like the people who really get it, it's really nice to see, their reactions and them talking about, the storyline or, at the end, one player was telling us how she was in tears and stuff, and that is, kind of like what we were hoping to create, which was a strong emotional reaction. So just to get that kind of feedback has been really fun.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I mean, it's been awesome to awesome to see all the feedback. I mean, I think a lot of people, especially for a game that was like designed for VR, a lot of people, if you go into it, or a lot of those that have gone into it, kind of expecting more of like a laid back, adventure, have really, I thought, have been really digging it. Those who are maybe looking for a little more action, maybe not so much so, but we definitely didn't design it as an action game. So, but yeah, it's been awesome to see all the response so far.
That's awesome. And I think that's one of the new things that you deal with game development in 2019 is you launch it, but then you have the conversations with the players afterwards. And that probably wasn't so much the case when you were making Sega cartridges back in the day, Ed.
No.
And I want to hear a little bit about dolphins. Okay? Dolphins are going to be a big part of our conversation today. You created Ecco the Dolphin, and up until that time, that wasn't really a character choice in games that often. What was your fascination with dolphins, and why did you think that Ecco the Dolphin could work?
Well, before I worked at Sega, I worked for a company called Sunburst Communications, and we made educational software.
Okay.
And there was a game or like this multimedia package that I worked on. I did the Apple II games for. It was called Voyage of the Mimi, and it was about this little boy that goes on a ship, on a boat for the summer with his grandfather, and they study whales. They just take pictures of them and they track them. And so I got into the whole whale thing. And then I started to learn more about how echolocation works and about how I got fascinated with the idea of whales being like a sentient being. And then I read this book called The Sounding. I can't remember the guy's name. Searles, I think, is the name of the author. But it was all from the point of view of a sperm whale. And, it would think in its head and it would communicate with others. And what's really fascinating to me about sea mammals is that they emit a sound and then they listen to the reflection and then it forms a picture in their head.
Wow.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So they're like swimming video cameras. But then they can say the picture to another whale. So like if I describe my brother to you, you could have a vague image in your head what he looks like. But if I was a whale and you were a whale, don't say anything. I would emit a sound and you would see my brother. So the idea that they're tossing around virtual reality really fascinated me. And then I got into the whole like sort of side scroll, smooth scrolling sprites, and the sine wave of a dolphin movement. The combination of buoyancy and gravity really captured me. I'm like, this is perfect. But the problem is no guns, no inventory, no pockets, no enemies.
Yeah, I know.
So I had to like backtrack from just the desire of that mechanic.
How did Sega take that? Were they on board, or did it take some convincing?
No, initially it was pretty negative. I pitched the whole idea to my boss once, Clyde Grossman, and we went to dinner, killed a bottle of wine, and I hold on a second. And he didn't like it. He said, "Who wants to be an effing fish?" And from back then, video games were like these little characters, and like the adults that were making video games used to think that kids wanted to be these little characters. And I tried to they don't want to be the character, they want to play with the character. So initially it was a negative. It was pretty negative, but then I stuck it out. Tenacity, I guess, prevailed.
That's awesome. Had you
That's
worked
what
on?
you need in this industry. You need to be tenacious.
Yeah. And what's funny too is you're talking about echolocation for Ecco the Dolphin, but that also is a huge part of Jupiter and Mars. Did you know about Ed's story at all, you guys? Did you have any idea what he went through with Ecco, and you tried to learn from that?
I think Sam could probably state his own experience with Ed's games, but I grew up playing a lot of them. Ironically, and I've mentioned this to other people in various interviews, like Ecco was not actually an influence on Jupiter and Mars, and there's no negative connotation to this, but it's just that when I was growing up, like when Ecco the Dolphin came out, right around the time where I found myself paying my own rent, right? So I was working like long shifts behind the bar, stuff like that. So I didn't have time for any games. So there's like that whole Nintendo Entertainment System. I was a Genesis guy, but the systems became popular around the time where I started having to pay rent for a living, by myself, no parents to rely on and stuff. And so, I basically missed out on probably about 5 solid years of gaming, and Ecco was one of the casualties. I really got into checking out Ecco the Dolphin when it finally came out on Dreamcast, which I thought was really, really beautiful. But since somebody else was reviewing on EGM, I didn't really have too much time with it. But I've always respected your games I've played a lot of them. Just Ecco wasn't one of them. But
I have played it. I definitely played Ecco, and I'll for me you were mentioning, Ed, the kind of that motion, that buoyancy motion of the dolphin, like that to me is like forever imprinted in my memory. It's just it was so beautiful. It felt so good, and so for that, whenever I think back of Ecco, it's just sort of that motion was just so nice.
I also appreciated the fact that you were actually playing as a dolphin, because that was an unusual character choice. Everybody was throwing animals in their games those days, Bubsy and, because of Sonic or whatever. Everybody had like an animal mascot, but a dolphin presented a really unique set of tools, or lack thereof, as you mentioned, like a lack of inventory, all those kinds of things. There's no guns. There's nothing really to shoot besides
no clothing.
Nude the entire time, full frontal nudity. But I always like the games like Colibri and things like that. And speaking of which, have you ever seen this movie, Epic?
Yes.
I feel like the people who made Epic must have been like Colibri fans back in the day, because it's kind of cool. And I did pick up, when I was in Japan, semi recently, a copy of Ecco the Dolphin 2.
I love that cover.
Yeah,
it's so
exactly. I
great.
bought it on the strength of the cover. It's so cool. But now that Echo's on like every Sega compilation, like I do plan on seeing how far I can get into the games. So although I've heard that they're pretty notorious for being difficult.
Yeah. Well, I've got a question about this. They are difficult. Echo must be in almost every interview that you guys have these days. Do you get asked about? You've been talking about Jupiter and Mars. Do you get asked about Echo the Dolphin quite a bit?
90% of the time.
Yeah. I mean, everybody remembers Echo, so it's and there are not a lot of other Dolphin games.
Yeah.
So,
The only other game where a dolphin is the principal or central character, there's games like Endless Ocean and stuff like that where they're dolphins.
Yeah, you'll meet dolphins. Yeah.
Or Aquanauts Holiday, stuff like that. But the only other game besides the Echo games and now our game that has a dolphin as its lead character is this old PlayStation 1 game called Depth, or in the UK it was called Fluid,
Yes.
which is like half of a dolphin simulator. And surprisingly, for a PS1 game, the animation was very, very nice. But it's like a dolphin / music synthesizer. I don't know how to explain it. You just have to Google it. But those are the only games. So I understand why people would reference us and Echo the Dolphin. So
And
like
Ed,
when Tigertron does a game with hummingbirds, coincidentally, I expect to get a lot of questions about Colibri.
And Ed, I don't know if you read a lot of the interviews and the news and stuff about video games, but I'm wondering if your Google alerts have been going off because Echo the Dolphin is sort of back in the news again.
Yeah, the little Genesis Mini spurred a lot of news.
So you got the game out. Much to Sega trying to stop you from making this game, you got it out, and it's clearly successful because you got a sequel, and then you got Echo Junior, and then did it get easier because it was selling, or did it get easier because the game was good and it was different?
Well, I think conceptually it was a tough sell, but then as soon as I got to build a prototype, and it was just like a static sprite of a dolphin. It wasn't even a dolphin. It was it looked like a pencil, and on a blue rectangle. But that motion was there, and then we were able to tweak water viscosity and how fast when you pump up the flukes, how fast it goes, and how heavy the dolphin is, or the gravity setting. So we kept tuning it, and it was like, hey, this is a lot of fun. Just the mechanic is fun. The mechanism itself is fun. And then as soon as everybody saw that, I watched the title appear on all the roadmap, paperwork that was going around. Hey, there it is. Yep. Oh, we're gonna do it. And that was it. It was easier after that.
That's got to be a good feeling.
Yeah.
I wanted to add too, though, thinking back on the Genesis days, I was always kind of a real evangelist for video games, like even growing up, and Echo was really important to me too at the time because it represented a more peaceful video game. It was like the type of game I could actually show my mom and be like proud of video games.
Yes.
And definitely during that time, you had all the other games like Mortal Kombat and things like that. That a lot of that was what people knew of video games. So I don't know. I'm thinking back now. I'm like, Echo was really important to me for that reason too.
Yeah, I remember that the whole Joe Lieberman thing. With Night Trap.
Yep.
And it's like, video games are gonna just like what happened to the comic book industry in the 50s, the video games were like getting demonized all of a sudden.
Yep.
And everybody kept pointing to Echo the Dolphin, but look, we also made this, not just horrific and gory and overly sexual games. But the irony of the whole thing is that it's probably the most horrific game made back in those days because in nature is violent and everything wants to eat you, and you're going to die horribly once they get a hold of you, and then throw the aliens in there that are trying to eat you, and it's a violent, horrific game. It just is with pretty primary colors in the ocean. Everybody sort of interpreted it as non-violent.
Well, you know what's
Yeah.
beautiful about it, and same with Jupiter and Mars, because we're constantly reminded of how fragile the ecology is, and species on Earth are being threatened, and our oceans are polluted, and all. It's just good to think about dolphins. It's just good to think about a species of beautiful animals that we just don't talk about enough. And you guys
Yeah.
both made games that get us doing that, which is pretty commendable.
You know, like for us, we put like we have like a little bit of an environmental message in our game. We try not to. I know you've tried the game out, and hopefully you don't feel like we beat you over the head with it. It's just a setting, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, nowadays the environmental discussion is more prominent because of just how much more science there is about it versus maybe what there was back in 1992.
Yes.
That was like 25 years ago, right? Or even more, 27 years ago. And I mean, I'm not discounting how much you may or may not have been thinking about it, but like you've done a few games where animals have been involved. Whether it's Calibri, whether it's Echo Junior. How much of that was like at any part of the development of these games a part of your thinking?
Well, what was important to me was the science part of the science fiction. The whole, like the echolocation thing that I was talking about before, and the ocean as an organism and an ecosystem.
It's awesome.
And that was really, it wasn't. And I got a lot of feedback too. It's like, why don't you put some scuba divers with harpoons? Or why don't you have fishing nets or oil slicks? And I just rejected anything that was related to humanity because I really wanted, like, from the story point of view, it to be a dolphin story. It's like a dolphin story. It's none of our business. It's like they got their own culture, their own jokes, their own way of life, and this takes place like long after we're gone for some reason. So there wasn't a so much don't pollute, give a hoot this kind of message in it. It was more just think about the fact that we're not the only self-aware cultural creatures. I mean, dolphins have families and they communicate in similar ways, and they have wars and all the stuff that we have, but they just do it slightly differently. And I just wanted to get that feeling across. It's like, hey, there's other sentient beings on the Earth.
That's awesome.
Rather than the environmental part of it.
Ed, you were at Sega when things really exploded for the company. Like the Genesis became a massive, massive success and challenged Nintendo, which had kind of revitalized video games in general, period. What was it like?
It was fun to be a part of that.
Yeah, what was it like working at Sega during that time? Was it exciting? Was it challenging? Was it crazy?
Well, all right. So it's the job that I think back on. That's like, man, if I only knew what I had back then. Like it was, you didn't realize it when you're in the middle of it. And I was there. I worked for Sega of America, I think, almost 9 years. So it's a good chunk of my life. And I remember being pretty aggravated almost all the time. But but now looking back on it, it's like, damn, oh man, it was such a great time. But I gotta say that Tom Kalinske was like the kind of like leader. Like he came in as president, I think like a year after I was there. Michael Katz was there, and he was awesome too. But when like Sega was like sort of like at an all-time low, Sega of America, I should say, when Tom came in, and then he just started immediately with his speeches and like here's what we got to do, here's how we have to treat our customers, and video games, like it's so easy to slip the schedule. I mean, I know everybody knows that, and it's like when retailers print these white papers, I think they were called. No, what were they called? White space, something like that. Anyway, these little flyers that had coupons on them or whatever. You see Ecco the Dolphin, but if you slip a couple of months, it'd be really uncomfortable for the retailer not to have that physical box on the shelves. So like Tom really drove home the how important it is to be accurate with your schedules and be professional about actually getting these things out. And then we went. Sorry, this is long-winded, but this is the best part of it. When we went to CES in Vegas, it was right before we like officially took on Nintendo. Like we were trying to become number one in terms of sales. And
This is amazing.
He gave us this speech that was movie worthy. And I'm like, I stand up and I'm clapping. Nobody else did, but I was so jazzed and I was so psyched to be a part of it. And then we had Nintendo right in front of us, and it's like we could do it. So and then as a result, now if I look back at all the people that I worked with, they're like family now. That's like we were in the we were in a war together, and it made everybody get really really close. But I also have to say one thing is that during the time we were making games, when I was making Echo or Shakan or any of those games during those years, video games never felt like it was going to be an industry. It's like the comic book industry was way bigger. It's like, oh, one day, maybe I could make a comic book because that's the path to success. Video games were just video games, and nobody really cared that much about it. There's a couple million active players. They were all kids. They were all boys, and so I had no idea that it was going to turn into what it is today. I kind of, I just got swept along like that feather on Forrest Gump.
Yeah, they like various analyses of the video game industry through the years sort of said that it's like when even the Nintendo, no matter how successful something was, whether it was Atari 2600 or the NES or the Genesis, no matter how successful they were, it wasn't until probably I think probably the PlayStation 1 and it started selling those kinds of numbers that people started to take it seriously and beyond calling it a fad, that was going to die off like a Rubik's Cube or something like that. And now it's like
just like a toy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now it's a major entertainment tentpole, with huge movie launch size, opening day blockbuster sales and stuff like that.
And the same team sizes as well. I mean, there's like 500 people on teams. When you were making games, Ed, how many people would make a game like Ecco the Dolphin or The Adventures of Batman and Robin?
5 or 6.
Wow.
Five or six.
Yeah. And now it takes literally 2,000 people to make Red Dead Redemption.
Right.
Crazy.
Wasn't there 2,000 voice actors alone?
Seriously?
Ed, I want to talk a little bit about you working with licensed games because I've recently become super addicted to the 16-bit superhero stuff. I've got Adventures of Batman and Robin on Genesis, which I love. I think your X-Men 2 Clone Wars game, I think that's one of the best Genesis games, period.
I totally agree with you. I freaking
it's amazing. But what was it like to work with Marvel and Warner Brothers and DC and some of the other companies that were working on these licensed properties?
It was like, so working with Marvel, it was like that was like the ultimate for me because I grew up with Marvel comic books, and Spider-Man, him and I were both born in New York in 1962, like the same month, and I grew up with the character, and I totally was a Marvel head, and when there was an opportunity to produce the Spider-Man game,
which is great, by the way. This game is amazing, by the way. Spider-Man, it's like the fact that you can pause and then change to the camera and then take a picture and then make some money that you can get better web.
So you can make webbing.
Yeah, it's so smart, man. It's made with so much love.
Great.
It's so great.
Can I drop the F-bomb every
You
once in
can
a
drop
while?
it. It's all good. I think we're all over 18 here. Yeah? Yeah? Okay. Yeah, you did it.
So first of all, I was very in awe of Marvel, like I just said. So to work with them, I think I bled of respect. So I had an easy time with it. Also, I knew the mythology as good as anybody there. So, the guy whose job it was to make sure that, we're using the right characters, et cetera, et cetera, he didn't have to correct me because I knew the mythology so well. So we got along. And, during Spider-Man and then the beginning of the first X-Men, they gave me this comic book. It was Spider-Man #1 by Todd McFarlane. It was the special platinum issue that had no ads in it.
Oh,
and they
wow.
only gave it to retailers, like one per retailer. But Marvel gave me that comic. They handed it to me. And it's like, to me, I cried a little. It was like,
Oh, that's great.
So it was great. And what was your question again? I forgot.
That was, you answered it wonderfully.
Okay.
Did you have more fun working on stuff that was crafted for you, characters that were crafted for you, or did you have more fun coming up with your own things?
Yeah, it's like two kinds of fun. It's like different meals that you love. They're just different meals and you love them for different reasons. I given a choice, I would make my own stuff. But there's also IPs out there in the future I plan to be involved with, or I'm going to try to be involved with because I love them so much. But yeah, it's really satisfying to come up with the stuff and then go through the process, the 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards process to actually bring it into existence, and then maybe get a couple good reviews and know that people are playing it. It's extremely satisfying to make something fresh and new.
I just want to clarify for anybody that's just tuning in right now, this isn't Russell Crowe on Skype. This is Ed Annunziata, who worked at Sega on phenomenal games. He's the creator of Ecco the Dolphin. And we have focused a lot on Sega in this discussion because I wanted to do that. But you have a brand new game that's out very soon, or is it out already? It's called
It's out now.
Space War Arena. Okay, tell us a little bit about Space War Arena.
Okay, it's on Nintendo Switch. It's a real-time strategy action game. It's you have a starbase, I have a starbase, and we put out our little ships and they fight. I just love the game. And it's been getting pretty good reviews. We have it on the Switch right now, and it's only it's a player versus player game. Like that's what it's designed to be. But when we launched it, or when we put it out on Switch, we didn't put the online feature in yet, but that's in now.
Cool.
So we're trying to get approval. So the next update will have online play, which I'm really excited about.
I played a little bit about it, a little of it, and I thought it was fantastic. It's got a super immediate kind of quick strategy experience. So there's an arcadey bit, and things happen fast, but you really have to think and you have to kind of decide when you're going to send those ships out.
It's like a real-time chess, but the pieces explode. That's
so cool. And did you call it Space War because it wasn't the original video game Space War?
All right, so here's the crazy thing. So I mentioned in 1962, Spider-Man and I were born in August, the same month, and in New York. Also, that summer, Steve, I can't remember his name, but I think it was either MIT or Bell Labs or somebody made the first Space War game. The year I was born.
Wow.
And I always loved any games with little ships. I don't know why. It's like Defender or any of those you know what I'm talking about. So
totally.
That's where Space War. It's really the 56-year sequel to the original Space War game. And what's also very interesting about that game was from the get-go, you could never play it single player. You had to have 2 people to play it, otherwise it's unplayable. So I love that sort of attitude. It's like the first video game that ever existed, it never occurred to them to make a single player mode. It's like games are obviously between 2 people at least.
Right. Well, that's what all the video tennis and Pong and all of that stuff was really focused on. engagement in the living room, and we've moved away a little bit from that. I feel like we, as an industry, need to kind of celebrate sitting on a couch together and enjoying this stuff a little bit more.
Yeah, it ends up being it's a fun multiplier when you play with other people. Just even a shitty game is pretty good when you play.
Absolutely. Ed, did you look up to video game makers when you were coming into the business? Did you know anything about the history? Did you know Eugene Jarvis? Or
like Mark Cerny was at Sega when I was there at the time, and he's just
he's
he
a
was
genius.
just unbelievable. Yeah, I could listen to that guy talk all day. Oops, sorry. I paid pretty close attention to people that were cranking it. Like these guys now are on my radar. I'll keep an eye on what they do next. 'Cause I really liked your game. They gave
thanks
so
much.
I played it on the PS. I didn't know that much about it. I've seen some videos, and then like on my Twitter, like people are, did you see this? Did you see this? And they want me to comment on this. I got to play it. I still didn't get to Red Dead Redemption 2 yet, so my to be played stack grows constantly. So Jupiter Mars was on there, but then this thing happened, and somebody sent me a code. Thank you for that, and I played it. And I really enjoyed it, and I stopped playing it because I realized, oh shit, this is a VR game. And I'm like, okay, I don't have the PlayStation VR.
You can play it both ways.
Yeah, no.
But you want to play
I
it.
want to play it in VR.
Yeah.
So I paused it after I saved the turtles. I didn't even get to meet Mars yet. So I'm saving it. So don't say any spoilers.
James and Sam, I'm wondering if what it's like to talk with somebody, because Ed is making games now. He's made games. Yeah. We talked about the Genesis all day here today, which I wanted to do, but he's made them for every machine along the way. He made Saturn games and PlayStation games. He's got a brand new Switch games. Is that inspiring to you to talk to a developer that half of his life, or more than half of his life, he's been making video games?
Yeah,
still doing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Like considering how long Sam and I have been in the media side of things at EGM and OneUp.com, Ed was always somebody I was interested in talking to, but we never had a chance to for whatever reason. What's that?
You were busy paying the rent.
Yeah.
No. This was like after I actually got into the game journalism side. Working at Electronic Gaming Monthly, we just never had a chance to interview you. And it's thanks to Chris Baker, our colleague, former colleague Chris Baker, who pinged you on Twitter. Now, Victor, Sam, myself, we all get to speak with you and hear some inside stories about your time at Sega. I'm sure you've got volumes that you can fill.
Yeah, that's the hard part right now is that I would want to talk to you for hours to find out more about just what it was like back in the day at Sega, and even just some of the games too. I wanted to mention too, like X-Men. I always thought it was so fascinating back in the day, or awesome back in the day, when the sprites were so big on screen, as a choice for those games. And I could just ask you for hours, how you pulled that off even at the time. And
we'd basically nerd out. We'd nerd out.
Yeah.
Which I guess is lucky for you that you're not stuck in a room with us.
I know.
You know what though?
Limit.
Yeah. I think what this speaks to is and I say this all the time on the show, is that we are so quick to scrub the past and think about what's next and what's new. And there's, validity in that, because it's exciting to be entertained by the future. But there is so much remarkable work. And one of the beautiful things about Twitch and YouTube and this generation, and, stuff like the Analog Mega SG and YouTube channels devoted to retro gaming, is we are stopping a little bit and talking and having conversations with the people that inspired us, Ed. People that
absolutely.
Got us going. Your work inspired us, man.
So thank you for paving the way for Dolphin games. I apologize that 1992 was a busy year, but I'll make up for that. I've got it on my 3DS. I've got it on my pre-ordered what do you call it? Was a mini Genesis?
Yeah.
Oh
Whatever.
yeah, the Genesis
And
Mini.
it's on
like
the
the next game.
it's on the Genesis collection too.
But
Yeah.
But the only game I actually of yours, Ed, that I don't think I've ever played was Colibri, and I had a 32X. I just don't think I was able to
That game
get
is
that.
hard to find.
Yeah, I think it was hard to find, or I don't know why I had never played it at
Do you
the time.
remember if Sega only printed like 45 copies of that game or something? It's so expensive.
Yeah, I don't know why. Yeah, maybe they did they're like Annunziata is doing these little animal games again.
Yeah.
Why don't they make
just
a,
make a
a
few up.
compilation, Annunziata's little animal game collection or something like that? You know? I mean, no, but seriously, like Echo and I think Echo 2 have been ported to various virtual consoles and stuff by Sega onto 3DS and Wii U and stuff like that. Is there any technical reason that Colibri and games like that would be difficult to port to modern systems?
No. There, it just what was it about the 32X? I think there was an additional 8-bit per pixel playfield, so you had 256 colors, which was on the Genesis you could only have 16 colors per little character.
Wow,
little 8x8.
That's a huge jump.
So it's crazy.
So I think modern consoles can handle 256 colors.
Yes. Echo the Dolphin was a half a megabyte, not even 1 megabyte.
That's amazing.
So it's, basically it's an icon compared to the games today. We do have a pretty cool 3D Colibri going that looks highly realistic, and again the motion of the animal and the feel of the mechanic was really
Heard
good.
it here first on EPN TV.
That's so great, man.
Tune in for the scoops.
Do you have a favorite game, Ed, of the ones that you built? When you think on your career, is there one that really is a big part of your heart?
They're like my children. Yep. So obviously, I just love them all. What just popped into my mind is there was a Saturn game called Three Dirty Dwarves.
Yes.
Yeah. And
I have that.
We're Saturn guys right here. So
he was definitely a Saturn, like all about the Saturn.
Yeah, that particular game, because the whole team played all the voices in the cinematics. It just made the whole game a development experience like really entertaining, and I never remember laughing so much.
That's great.
And a lot of the sort of random funny shit that we would say in the voice box actually made it into the game.
Wow.
So it was So in terms of hilarity, Three Dirty Dwarves was number one. Echo was super satisfying because nobody paid attention to it for a long time, and then it was like, hey, look at this, and I was like, wow. So the response from my peers was really good, and I very much enjoyed that. And I made a PlayStation game called Tiny Tank.
We like that game a lot. Yep.
I loved working on that game. Yeah, so I love all my games. Sorry.
Yeah. That's great, man.
By the way, I only found out that in the last week that there was an Echo Junior.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember.
You were busy paying rent.
I know.
So much rent to be paid. It never stops. There's gonna.
I'm gonna use that line.
I can't believe this shit.
Hey, Tigatron is in New York?
Yeah.
I'm from New York. Here's some small weird way to connect with you spiritually.
Dolphins.
I was born in New York, but I was born in Manhattan, not Queens. Apologize for that. And I actually drew for Marvel Comics in the mid '90s. So there's this whole synchronicity here that it's working on multiple levels.
That's crazy.
That is
what
awesome.
is it game developers from New York? They want to make dolphin games.
I don't know. It's got to be something in the water, just like the pizza. That's why the pizza's better, because it's something in the water.
Maybe because
So
that's what you dream about when you're in the concrete jungle, right? You're just like, I would love to be in an ocean with dolphins right now.
Exactly. What else is there to dream about?
Clearly, the three of you guys need to collaborate and work with Marvel and bring out some awesome side-scrolling 16-bit style new games with those characters, which I bug them about all the time because 16-bit Marvel games rock still in 2019.
That then
And
somehow
Chris Baker will back
fit
me up on
into
that.
The MCU.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have to make sure it fits into the MCU, and then
True.
we'll be good.
True. Guys, this has been one of my favorite interviews, man. This is really fun. Ed, you are a treasure, and it's delightful to have you. And this also makes me realize that I have to bring back the Vic's Basement podcast because I want to talk with you guys for like 2 hours. But we do have more show that we're going to get into. We're going to play some of your games, Ed. But thank you, gentlemen. Thank you so much for being here.
Nice to
You're
meet you
awesome.
guys.
You
nice
too.
to meet you.
Yeah,
Ed.
you
Thanks
too.
for
That's
the time.
Ed Annunziata and Sam Kennedy and James Mielke. Guys rock. Thank you so much.
Thanks.